Hey everyone, after more than 15 years in the business, I finally got a book published. If you want to do me the biggest favor in the whole world, please head over to mikeyop.com and buy a copy. That's MIKEYOPP.com, and the book is named Martyr, and it's about psychics and the history and future of the universe. I wrote it, and I think you'll love it.
Hi, this is Mike Oppenheim, and you are listening to Coffin Talk, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. This week, we have Amos Smith on the line. He's an author, certified counselor, and workshop leader. He's published 2 books with a third on the way. His first book is called Healing the Divide, Recovering Christianity's Mystic Roots. And his second book is titled Be Still and Listen, Experience the Presence of God in Your Life. The third book is A Journey of Holistic Mysticism, Experience the Integrated Spirituality of the Quakers. And I am from California, and I've always been intrigued in a very positive way with the Quakers, so I was very excited when we got to interview Amos. So, Amos, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on the show, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. We normally ask guests how old they are, where they grew up, and what generation, if any, they think they belong to.
So I am 52. I grew up all over the world because my dad was in diplomatic service. But I have lived most of my time in the States since I was 10 years old on the West Coast, and I currently live in Washington State. What was the other thing you asked?
What generation, if any, do you consider yourself a member of?
You know, I graduated from high school in 1988. So I guess I grew up in the 80s in Virginia, and so that makes me what generation? I don't know.
Yeah, I think they call you Gen X, but the reason we ask the question is actually the beauty of the answer, which is when you have that little concern for it, that's like a perfect answer in my opinion. Because that's the whole. There's a big thing going on in a lot of the things I see and listen to where people believe we're in a culture war, and it is definitely a goal of mine for people not to believe that we're in any war. Because I don't believe in war. So I like to ask people what generation, because I think that as you listen to people from generations you stereotype and realize that they're all so diverse, it starts to break down how we stereotype and categorize ourselves and other people.
Right. Well, I'm married. I think you are too. And every morning I could think of a few reasons why I should stiff arm my wife, right? But of course that's ridiculous. Why would I want to do that? It's the same thing. I think generations. You can think, this is the reason why I should stiff arm that generation. But we don't need any more of that.
Yeah, exactly. And man, your mini biography that you just gave us is so interesting. So I'll definitely want to be asking you about the diplomatic service. And actually, one of my jobs is indexing books. And today I was indexing a book on global warming, climate change, and the United Nations. And they talked about how there's a United Nations Quaker Council. The basic question I think that our audience would want to know is, how do you define what a Quaker is? And can you explain to the average layman what a Quaker is?
Yeah, so I was a member of Santa Cruz Friends meeting in Santa Cruz, California throughout the 90s. And now I'm also a member of a Quaker meeting and have been a member for a few years. Basically, I think of the Quakers as probably the most contemplative arm of the Protestant movement. It believes in the sacredness of silence, especially the particular Quaker denomination I'm a part of, which is FGC, if you want to call it a denomination. And it believes that, being immersed in silence, at least for 1 hour during meeting for worship once a week, really invigorates the rest of the week. And it has something that's valuable and that's important. And there is something about the silence when you start to become acclimated to it or marinate in it, that it really does start to change you. And I think it connects you with your deeper self, and also brings over time more peace and more joy and just more contentment in life.
That's a wonderful answer. I had so much to unpack in that, but I would like to know how you define deeper self.
So the historic Quakers, they said, go to a meeting for worship and you do what they call waiting worship, or could call it silent prayer. Some people do centering prayer, whatever you want to call it. It's basically all of the usual surface level talk that you have going on, and everybody plays tapes in their minds, and they usually play some tapes just over and over again. But if you're able to just let go of all that and just sit in the silence, you start to resonate with, what some authors have referred to as true self. I think it was Thomas Merton who was one of the first who often talked about the difference between true self and false self. And true self is connected to a mission, that everybody, has gifts and they have something that resonates deep within them, some kind of mission, something they're on this planet to do. And so connecting with that, especially in the context of silence, it makes you more authentic because you start to become revitalized and vigorous and energized for whatever this mission is. And so many of the historic Quakers, that's what they talk about. They talk about, just connecting with some passion that you have for making this world a better place. So that's what I mean by true self, because I really do believe everybody deep down does have a passion. They do have a mission. And some of them have not found it yet, but we all have that.
That's very profound. And I can see why you said it's considered the contemplative arm of Protestantism. I don't want to get into yet, Quakerism and how it ties into overall Christianity and all that, and we may not even have time for it, because I'm really just much more interested in the philosophical side and how much it sounds like this is something that predates a lot of the hippie mindfulness movement, which is hilarious to me because you mentioned living in Santa Cruz, and that's where I'm from, is a little north of there, Oakland Bay area, but I spent a lot of time in Santa Cruz. And so I'm fascinated because this idea of the sacredness of silence and this idea of what you can gain from immersing yourself in silence is more captivating than any other phrasing I've heard for it. I meditate personally, and I have a mantra, and it works, and I love it. But when you sit in silence, is it better with a group? Do the dynamics change? Can you describe how you sit in silence?
Yeah, I think, Mike, one thing that might be helpful, though, is, we are a very goal-oriented society, and we always have goals out in front of us. And so I would like to explore just briefly, what is the goal of silence? What are we trying to get to? And I really think after all of my reading, there's this one phrase in the Philokalia, and I consider the Philokalia the greatest, mystical text in the Christian tradition. It's celebrated in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, but it's becoming more discovered in the West now. But there's this one phrase in the Philokalia, and it's a mind-blowing phrase for me. It says, there is nothing that I desire that I do not already possess. Now that is a totally revolutionary sentence. It totally takes the legs out of the market economy, because if you're truly content on every level, and if there's absolutely nothing that you desire, then there's nothing that can be pitched at you or marketed to you, because you have everything you need. And that was the ultimate revelation for me when I was at St. Benedict's Monastery in Snowmass, Colorado. I was doing a 10-day centering prayer retreat, and on about day 7, I was in this deep, deep silence, and I felt this profound peace. I felt just a deep, abiding joy, and I thought to myself, if I die tomorrow, that's okay, because I've experienced now what I want to experience in this life. I've experienced now what I needed, what I came here for. And so it's that's the beauty, that's the revelation of where all this silence is leading to, is it's hard to even explain or put into words, but that's the best I can do.
You're very eloquent, and everything you say is making sense to me. And I think because you mentioned death, and you said if I die tomorrow, that's okay, it is an opportune time to get to the point of the show, which is to ask you, what do you think happens when you die? And of course, I'd like to know, does the Quaker faith have a specific answer to that, and does yours agree with it, if at all?
So I have kind of a simple approach, to this question. I just tell people, I don't have to imagine hell. I have seen people in hell. I saw an addict who was, he was addicted to heroin, and he was, in the throes of that addiction, and he was, just to look at him was excruciating, and he was in total hell, and so I didn't have to try to imagine some hell out there or Dante's Inferno or anything like that, because it was right in front of me. And I just thought to myself, if there is a hell, it will be a continuation of whatever our state of consciousness is in this world. So for that person, that state of hell that they're in, if they were to pass away, let's say the following day, I think whatever, experience they're having in those moments, that's just going to continue in some other form after they pass. I have also seen people who are in total heaven. They radiate joy. They radiate contentment. People are drawn to them because of this. It's not something that they have to, try to create. It just spontaneously emerges, and there's just a feeling of peace around them, and there's just nothing that needs to be solicited, or there's no manipulation. There's just the joy of somebody who's found themselves and who is content in their own skin. So then if that person dies the next day, I think wherever they go, it'll be a continuation of their experience, their lived experience. I'm a person that I don't give a lot of credence to belief systems and belonging systems. For me, experience is sovereign. And that's the beauty to me of you said that you meditate, and, people who do centering prayer and silent prayer forms. The beauty to me is that it's based on experience. And when you look at science, any scientist worth their salt, is going to be based on experience and actual experiments that have been done. And I think it's the same is true in religion, that if your religion is based on a belief system or a belonging system that is not rooted in experience, it's not going to be long-standing. It's also not going to be something that's resistant to a persecution, because it's that deep underlying experience which I think ultimately carries us.
Wow, yeah. So, were you born? Were your parents Quakers?
My mother was Quaker for a time in Buffalo, New York, and she would go to meetings on a regular basis. But she also, was baptized into Episcopalian faith. And my whole family growing up, we were, Episcopalians. But my mom always had an appreciation for the Quakers and encouraged me to be involved.
So in your own estimation, if you're 52 now, how many years have you officially been a Quaker for?
Let's see, 15.
Okay. And life before that versus life since that decision, how much did declaring that faith change you?
Well, I think what matters in my estimation is just the silent prayer. So if you're part of a centering prayer group that meets at your Episcopal church, and you attend that group, once a week and experience that silence, and there is something extraordinary about the collective silence. Then I think for me, that's what's come to really be the most life-giving to me. So I don't know if it's really about the tradition per se, but about practicing centering prayer.
I would love for you to expand on this collective silence idea, because that's the one thing I'm not craving, but it's an experience, as you said, that I haven't had yet, and I'm really interested in it. So how would you explain the collective silence?
Hey everybody, I just want to thank you so much for listening to the show. Our numbers keep growing and we have a premium package, and it would really help us out if some of you loyal fans would head over there and sign up. You get bonus monthly podcasts, you get a book I wrote, and you also get extra essays and other content. So please head over to mikeyop.com, that's MIKEYOPP.com, and sign up today.
So if you're sitting in a seasoned Quaker meeting where it's been around for decades, there's going to be people in that meeting who are referred to as elders, and they've been doing this for decades themselves. And so there's a real quality of depth to these people. And when they're all sitting in silence, there's something that's referred to in Quaker tradition as the gathered meeting. And that's when there's a sense that not only are you collected within yourself and gathered and centered if you were sitting in meditation on your own, but there's something that you're participating in where everyone is gathered and centered at the same time. And it's a profound thing. It's hard to explain, but you just feel like you've gotten onto this bus, and that all that you're all in it together, and there's some kind of common experience in the silence, and it's hard to articulate, but nevertheless there it is, and seasoned Quakers will often refer to the gathered meeting.
That's incredible. So I mentioned that I grew up in California, so I've always been intrigued with Quakers. I realized as I said that anyone who's not from California probably had no idea what I was talking about. And so just to explain from my side of this, Quakers, in my estimation growing up, they're known as the peaceful people. Like, they're very anti-war and they're all for peace. I mean, that's why I said the thing about diplomacy and your father. Is that true, first of all, because I don't want to be inaccurate? Do Quakers not believe in war, or do they believe in peace, but that's not the same thing as not believing in war?
So there was a branch of the Protestant Revolution that is referred to as the Anabaptists. And the Anabaptists include the Quakers, the Mennonite, the Brethren, and the Amish, among some other groups. But what they all had in common is they all believed in what they refer to as the peace testimony. And that is that one of the clear testimonies of Jesus in the Gospels is a testimony of peace. That, if you can find a way out of violence, then you should. And the, perfect example is when there's this mob that's gathered to stone this woman who has been found in adultery. And the law of Moses says, such a woman should be stoned. And they come to Jesus and they say, so Jesus, what should we do? We're just about to stone this woman. And he says, well, first he doodles in the sand, which I think speaks volumes, because he has enough wherewithal and peace and composure within himself that even in a mob scene, he's able to just kind of crouch down and kind of doodle in the sand. But then he rises up and he says, he who is without sin, cast the first stone. And it's so brutally true that it hurts, and that is nonviolence at its core. It's finding out the real kind of underlying machinery of violence and trying to subvert it. And in this way, because basically all those guys who were gathered to stone that woman, so many of them had seen a prostitute in their youth themselves. And so they realize it's totally hypocritical, for them to start stoning this woman. And so they one by one, they walk away, and that's, that is the peace testimony, that there is a way in and around and, through and beyond violence.
Mm-hmm. So if a Quaker of this tradition and of the same faith you described were running for president, and some hard-nosed journalist wanted to really get them, how would they explain how a nation could take on the peace testament when they're already amidst all these wars? And again, I'm not asking this to attack you or the religion. I'm just very curious because I want more people to join this this bandwagon.
Well, so one very clear thing that people who are into the peace testimony, many of them advocate, is just the phrase "reduce the violence." So it's not about some kind of utopian idea that there's going to be no violence or we can eradicate the violence completely. I mean, we're realistic, right? But what we want to do is reduce the violence. Find a way to to minimize the violence. And one Quaker that I talked to, in Montana, said, I used to think that if somebody came through my window or my door at night and wanted to steal from me or whatever, that I would just kill him, right? But now, my thought is I'm just going to shoot him in the legs, and for me that was actually that's a revelation. It's like, okay, he's reducing the violence, So it's got to be realistic. It has to be practical. It's got to be real world. But how can we reduce the violence in any particular situation? And it has to be in context, because you can't just think, overarching kind of ideals about, nonviolence is just not realistic. It has to have a particular context, like that guy in Montana, and then think of, okay, in this situation, how can I reduce the violence?
And that was, like I said, like the stereotype of this religion, just for my audience to understand what it's like to grow up in California, was, oh, those are like the crazy extra peaceful guys. And it was hilarious to me because I always was like, well, wait, that sounds like the best thing ever. And talking to you has been nothing but me relishing this community that you get and this gathered meeting idea, because I've been in groups and I've loved a lot of groups, but the idea of a group where like the whole point is to sit in profound silence and not to argue and talk about who's right or wrong and who's doing it better than someone else. I mean, I just really appreciate that.
Well, and one of the realizations that comes out of profound silences, we were talking about finding your mission, finding your passion. But another thing that happens, and it's a fairly common experience, is that we start to realize the profound value of life. That life is intrinsically sacred, and that all life has value and has integrity to it. So, from that standpoint, we want to protect it. We don't want to destroy it. And this is particularly true in terms of the environment, in terms of climate change. We want to protect, and a lot of Quakers now refer to the Golden Rule 2.0. So the Golden Rule was do unto others as you would have them, do unto you. The Golden Rule 2.0 is do unto future generations what you would have them do unto you. So, in the context of climate change, the Golden Rule 2.0 is very, very significant. That we have to, think about future generations and what we're doing and how it's going to affect them.
Yeah, that's just, I love it, because I am like literally today indexing a book on climate change and like the next generations and everything, and I've never heard Golden Rule 2.0. That's a freaking awesome term. I'm definitely going to think about that for a while. You did mention harming others and how valuable all life is. So I am curious, are a lot of Quakers, and are you yourself vegan and or vegetarian?
So I tried when I was in college, I tried being a vegetarian for about a year, and I lost a bunch of weight. I did not feel good. Then I read a book called Eat for Your Type, and I found out that I'm a type O. My blood type is O, and that type O are really the historic carnivores. And that type O is really, from a medical standpoint, there's a number of physicians that say you really should have some meat in your diet. So since then, I have a little bit of meat in my diet, and my wife is type O also, and she found the same thing. And she tried being a vegetarian for a while. It didn't work for her either. So I really think vegetarianism, there again, people like to make these broad, overarching, like this is the cookie cutter thing for everybody. I don't like that kind of thinking. I just think it depends on the context. I mean, the subcontinent of India, I think 95% or 90% they're type A blood. And so it makes sense that there's more vegetarians there than anywhere else in the world, because the type A antigen is very good at breaking down legumes and breaking down other forms of protein besides meat. And so it just makes sense, and it makes sense for a lot of people to be vegetarian. But I just don't think having one position like everybody should be this way is really helpful. But I consume a medicinal amount of meat, and the meat that I consume is grass fed and organic, and it's ethically sourced.
It's too complicated for me to understand it all, let alone to start telling other people what they can and can't do. But what I am digging throughout this interview is the cohesiveness of the movement, that it really does seem to be what its reputation was, at least for me where I grew up. And I think so many people think, like even someone I was mentioning in passing, like, oh, we're interviewing a Quaker, they thought I was talking about like Quaker Oats. I think Richard Nixon was a Quaker. I think he's probably the most famous American Quaker. Is that true?
Yes, and I don't think he was FGC. I mean, there's three branches of Quakerism. I think he was FUM or EFI. I can't remember. But Quakerism itself is fairly broad and complex. I mean, I find that about all denominations.
Yeah.
I mean, Catholicism included. There's a certain percentage of churches where they're just very, just very progressive, and others that aren't. And, it just depends on which church you're stepping into.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about it, because it's like, it would be nice if we all had one group, but at the same time, people do have different likes and differences. It's interesting to me that people want to claim they're of one religion, but the more you talk to anyone who's religious, they're like, oh, no, but I'm in this discipline within this discipline. And you're like, okay, now I see it. It's all nuance. Just like you can live in a city and a county and a state and a country.
Right.
You mentioned earlier when you're talking about one of the greatest philosophical works of all time, and I've never heard the word, so I can barely pronounce it back to you, but I think you said it's the Soliloquy or something? What was that?
Yeah, it's the Philokalia. It's Philokkalia. And what it means in Greek is love of the beautiful. But it's basically a 4-volume text in the English. Was recently translated about, 40 years ago. But it's basically all the monasteries, many monasteries in Greece, and monasteries in Egypt, monasteries, throughout, the eastern lands. Their abbots wrote down what they thought was significant when it comes to silent prayer. And for them, they refer to it as Hezekiah. Hezekiah can be loosely translated in English as basically inner stillness. That's the loose translation, but how we get to that place of inner stillness and how we develop that inner stillness, and that to me is really the root. It's been the most life-giving thing in my life, and it's the inspiration for the books that I've written. It's just an amazing discovery that has made life beautiful. And what I encourage people to do is simply just to do it, to try it. And I think the very best method to try it is just simply to sit every day for as much as you can stand. So if you can only do, like, let's say you're starting with February, and you say, okay, I'm gonna try this. Maybe one day you can only sit there for 3 or 4 minutes, and you just have to get up. You got to do something. Fine. And just write down on your calendar 4 minutes, and then the next day sit again. Maybe that time it's going to be 5 or 6 minutes, and just do that for an entire 30 days. And by the end of 30 days, even if it's just been a little bit of sitting here, a little there, you're getting in the habit of doing it daily. That's the most important thing. And then in time, you'll get to the recommended amount that, my teacher, Thomas Keating, Benedictine monk, he recommends at least 20 minutes twice a day. And so eventually, you'll get there. But I think usually people are too rigid and they try to sit too much too early, and then they get burned out. So I think the best method is just to sit every day for as long as you can stand. And then if you do miss a day, just start all over again with the goal of just having 30 consecutive days where you sit every day. Even if 1 or 2 or 3 of the days is 3 minutes, doesn't matter. You're just getting in the habit of sitting.
Wow. You've been such a fantastic interview. You're passionate, you're interesting. I can tell how much you care about others and their journey through this world, and I just really appreciate it. Before we jump to the end of the interview, is there anything you want to add?
Well, as far as, if people are interested in centering prayer, which is the tradition that I now, oftentimes in workshops, I teach to Quakers, ironically. But if you are interested in centering prayer, you can just Google contemplative outreach, and you will find some centering prayer websites. You'll also find some centering prayer retreats throughout the nation that are sometimes weekend retreats or week-long retreats, 10-day retreats. But that's, I think, when the whole thing really starts to make more sense and really gains momentum, is if you can do a retreat. So, like I said, it's the most life-giving thing that I found in my 52 years. I would love to see other people experience that coming home and that peace, which, it's an ancient thing and an extraordinary thing. And all the various mystics of the world's religions are not lying to us. It's very life-giving.
Oh man, that's so sweet, and I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I just appreciate you existing. To everyone, again, always in the notes you can find him, but Amos Smith, he has, probably by the time you listen to this, 3 books out, but definitely 2. Please support him, and please support our show, and head over to MikeyOpp.com, that's MIKEYOPP.com, and sign up for a premium package. Again, thank you so much to Amos Smith, and to everyone else listening at home, my name is Mike Oppenheim. You have been listening to Coffin Talk, and we will see you soon.
You on the moon, and then I see that you see me, and I see you hear this tune, and I feel